It was supposed to be just another day underground. On December 27, 1975, hundreds of miners descended into the Chasnala colliery in Dhanbad, India, ready to begin their shift like they had done countless times before. They had no way of knowing that within hours, the earth above them would betray them in the most catastrophic way imaginable. A sudden and massive inrush of water from an adjacent abandoned mine flooded the tunnels at terrifying speed, trapping over 700 men beneath the surface. What followed was one of the deadliest mining disasters in recorded history, and one of the least talked about. Dhanbad, often called the coal capital of India, sits in the Jharkhand region and has been the backbone of India's industrial energy supply for over a century. By the 1970s, its collieries were producing millions of tons of coal annually, feeding steel plants and power stations across the nation. The Chasnala mine, operated under the Bharat Coking Coal Limited umbrella, was one of dozens of active collieries in the region. It employed hundreds of workers from nearby villages, many of whom came from generations of mining families. Coal was not just an industry here. It was a way of life, deeply embedded in the social and economic fabric of the entire region. What made Chasnala particularly dangerous was its proximity to older, abandoned mine workings. As coal extraction pushed deeper and wider, the boundaries between active tunnels and long-forgotten shafts grew thinner and more precarious. These flooded abandoned workings held enormous volumes of stagnant water under hydrostatic pressure, a ticking clock of geological disaster. Mine safety regulations of the era required barriers between active and defunct workings, but oversight was inconsistent and enforcement often lacking. Workers on the ground frequently had little knowledge of what lay on the other side of the rock face they were drilling into. The danger was invisible, immense, and imminent. The winter morning began like any other at the Chasnala colliery. Miners arrived at the pithead in the early hours, received their assignments, and descended into the darkness. Multiple shifts were active simultaneously, with some men working deep in the extraction areas, while others managed transport and ventilation tasks in the upper levels. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 700 and 750 workers were underground at the time the disaster struck. There was no warning, no rumble, no alarm, no early sign of the catastrophe that was seconds away. In coal mines of that era, the first indication of a water inrush was often the water itself, arriving fast and without mercy. At some point during the morning hours, mining operations breached into one of the adjacent flooded abandoned workings. The wall separating the active tunnels from the waterlogged void gave way under immense pressure. Millions of gallons of water surged into the active mine workings with brutal force. The tunnels, designed to carry men and coal, not floods, were overwhelmed within minutes. The water rose so rapidly that escape was nearly impossible for those working in the deeper sections. Men scrambled toward shafts and inclines, but the geometry of the mine worked against them. Water filled low-lying passages first, cutting off escape routes before many workers even understood what was happening. Above ground, the disaster unfolded through screaming alarms, rushing supervisors, and the sudden, eerie silence of a mine that had gone wrong. Workers who had been near the shafts when the inrush occurred managed to escape, emerging soaking and terrified to report what had happened below. The scale of what they described sent shock waves through the management and rescue teams. Emergency protocols were activated, but the sheer volume of water involved made any immediate rescue operation almost inconceivable. Local authorities, state officials, and national government representatives were alerted. The news spread rapidly through the mining community in Dhanbad, sending families rushing to the pithead in desperate hope that their fathers, husbands, and sons had made it out. Rescue teams descended as quickly as they could, But conditions inside the flooded mine were almost incomprehensible. Powerful pumps were deployed to drain the water, but the volume was so enormous that progress was painfully slow. Divers were sent into the pitch-black, debris-filled waters to search for survivors or accessible pockets of air. The cold, the darkness, and the unstable tunnel structure made every attempt a life-risking venture. International experts and specialized equipment were sought. For days, the nation watched and waited. The government dispatched technical teams from state and central coal authorities. Despite every effort, the reality became grimly clear. The mine could not be drained fast enough to save those still trapped inside. Official figures eventually placed the death toll at approximately 375 workers, though many independent sources and survivors' families claimed the true number was significantly higher, some estimates exceeding 700. The discrepancy in numbers was itself a reflection of the chaotic record-keeping and the political sensitivity surrounding industrial disasters in a developing nation. Many of the bodies were never recovered, remaining entombed within the sealed mine. For the families left behind, there was no grave to visit, no final farewell. The Chasnala disaster stands as one of the worst mining tragedies in Indian history, and among the deadliest underground accidents anywhere in the world during the 20th. In the villages surrounding the Chasnala colliery, entire households were shattered overnight. Women became widows, children grew up without fathers, and elderly parents lost their sole providers in a single morning. The compensation processes that followed were slow, bureaucratic, and widely regarded as deeply inadequate. Many families reported receiving far less than they were entitled to, and the process of claiming even that required navigating government systems that were poorly equipped to handle thousands of simultaneous cases. Some families waited years for resolution. The human cost of the Chasnala disaster extended far beyond those who died underground. It reshaped communities, erased livelihoods, and left a generation scarred by grief and financial hardship. The disaster triggered a significant political response in India. Parliament debated the state of mine safety regulations, and the Coal Ministry faced intense scrutiny over the enforcement of existing rules. Inquiries were launched, commissions were formed, and reports were eventually published. But critics argued that meaningful structural reform was slow to materialize. The nationalization of coal mines in India had occurred just a few years prior to the disaster, in 1973, meaning the government was directly responsible for operations at Chasnala. This added a charged political dimension to the tragedy. Rather than a private corporation facing accountability, it was the state itself that stood in the dock, a situation that complicated both the inquiry process and the response to victims' families. The root causes of the Chasnala disaster were not mysterious. Poor mapping of adjacent abandoned workings, inadequate barriers between active and disused tunnels, insufficient monitoring of water pressure in abandoned sections, and a culture of production pressure over safety all contributed. In the aftermath, safety regulations were reviewed and new directives were issued. Mines were required to maintain more accurate records of adjacent workings and enforce stricter barrier pillars between active tunnels and flooded sections. Yet history, tragically, would show that these lessons were not absorbed fully enough. India continued to experience serious mining accidents in the decades that followed, raising uncomfortable questions about whether corporate and bureaucratic memory truly changes after disaster strikes. Despite its devastating scale, the Chasnala disaster occupies a surprisingly small space in global historical memory. In part, this is because it occurred in a region and industry that attracted little Western media attention during the 1970s. Geopolitics dominated international news, and industrial disasters in the developing world were often treated as routine rather than historic. Within India, coverage was substantial at the time, but long-term memorialization has been limited. There is no internationally recognized monument at the site, no major documentary produced, and the event rarely features in broader discussions of mining history or industrial safety globally. The men of Chasnala deserve better. Their story is a warning that has never been heard loudly enough. Decades later, the coal fields of Dhanbad continue to produce and continue to bury their dangers. Underground fires, subsidence, and safety violations remain part of the region's troubling reality. The Chasnala colliery itself was eventually sealed, its tunnels a permanent tomb for those who never came home. But the lessons written in those flooded passages have never fully surfaced. Every mining disaster in the world carries an echo of those that came before it. Chasnala is one of those echoes, deep, dark, and too often unheard. If understanding this disaster helps even one policymaker, one mine inspector, or one engineer choose safety over speed, then the men who lost their lives that December morning will not have been entirely forgotten.